it's important to keep it in perspective that it's not terrible, right? It's
Uh-huh.
not, Rwanda in 94. It's
Right.
not Congo in 2008. It's not Salvador in 81, but it's not it's much worse than it was 7 months ago. The country was bad. The country was in
Mhm.
rough shape in February,
Yeah.
but at very least, more people were working,
Mhm.
for better or worse. Now
And
it's
yeah.
it's just you're just talking about you're talking about funding certain industries that are still laying off a huge amount of employees, regardless of how much they're being subsidized by the taxpayer. And you talk about other industries that are getting no attention at all and they're just being left to die. And in the meantime, you have unemployment numbers, and now these people are just unemployable. Like you have unemployment, the ranks of the unemployed swelling, and there's no jobs for them.
Mm.
So you're in we're in a very strange 1931 kind of situation, or maybe winter of 1930. Like the country's just getting used to this. Like,
Uh-huh.
oh yeah, bread lines. Okay, yeah, we're
It's
doing bread lines now. Okay, and the Dust Bowl
yeah.
has yet to hit. I mean, the Dust Bowl obviously made things a lot worse for a lot more people, but it's there's this unreality to it as well. Like you still have the stock market doing fairly well, and there's absolutely no reason why it should be,
It
unless it
shows
is
it's
what.
held up by magic beans or something because it makes no sense. It's been 2 weeks since we recorded, and
Hmm,
it feels like it's been a year elapsed in that time. Like
yeah,
it's, I keep thinking this about how how is writing or what we write about going to change because of this. Like the last time we had like a huge pandemic like this was the Spanish flu of the First World War, but we also had the First World War to contend with. So I was trying to think of like all the literature that I could have read that dealt with the Spanish flu, and I come up with nothing. Right? Like I get All Quiet on the Western Front, I get all these war books, but this is different, right? Like this is there was a podcast I listened to that said, now that we've had a president like Trump, how are you going to cast in movies another president for just like a generic president anymore? Someone who's
right.
capable, who gets caught up in whatever. Like it's, and I thought that was an interesting point. Like how you can't just think, oh, we're going to put in a old white dude in the White House in this movie or in this story and just competent because we've
Hmm.
proven that to be impossible. Not impossible, like not an inevitable thing that would happen. You know, like
Right.
now we got this, and I think it's an interesting thing, interesting topic. Like what is art? We joked about it last week or the last time we episode. Just put masks on everybody, but it's
Yeah.
not obviously that simple.
Well, it's interesting that in the 1994 movie Clear and Present Danger with Harrison Ford as Tom Clancy's Jack Ryan,
Mm.
it had a one of the most bone chillingly nihilistic portrayals of an American president
Mm.
that I have seen.
Yeah.
What made it so bone chilling was that it was so real. It didn't feel like a cartoon character. This president only cared about his image. He didn't care that he basically, subverted international law, subverted American law, and he was sending the CIA on this campaign of unlicensed murder
Mm-hmm.
and rampage to try to cover up his tracks, and have his corrupt friend who was murdered on the boat, which kind of sets the plot off. It's such a rambling movie. It's a well done movie, but it's the
Uh-huh.
plot is so intricate. There's so many characters that he doesn't get a lot of screen time, but he utters two very memorable lines in that movie, and it's wonderful. I forget the actor who portrayed him was a veteran actor. I believe he's still alive, but he was what part of that ensemble cast of The Thing. John Carpenter,
Mhm.
right? And he's a very good actor. And what I love is that he grew out his eyebrows, so he's very
Yeah.
stately looking, blonde, stately, in shape, but his eyebrows are kind of wild. So it's like every time they close up on his face, you get the sense that there's this bestiality just below the
That's
surface.
interesting. I noticed that about his
Yeah.
eyebrows too, but I didn't think anything of it. I just thought they were kind of,
Oh, it's
because I
definitely
watched that
so.
movie in the last 2 weeks, oddly enough, for the first time. Now that you mention it,
No kidding. What would
yeah.
you think of it? It's
Um, I think Harrison Ford is probably the most boring Jack Ryan there is.
ever, but he nailed it.
Yeah,
Jack Ryan's boring,
yeah. No,
right?
he's
He's
super
this
boring.
unlikely hero,
Mm. Yeah,
you know.
which is such an interesting, like, because you expect like a James Bond or like a like a like an action star, and he's just this guy, this normal Joe who's obviously not a normal person. He's like a doctor. He's got a doctorate and he works for the CIA. He's like the deputy uh, secretary general. But yeah, I thought it was that line that really stuck out to me was when the president says it has never happened to my friend before. It's in the very beginning that
Yeah.
shows the cronyism and like yeah, like because they had the analyst there who said they do this all the time, which is about a murder on a ship, and he's like, well, it hasn't happened to my friend before, which
Right.
is it shows the human aspect, I guess, of and the conniving, the manipulation that goes on after that. It's a good movie. I really liked it. John
What's
Milius, man, John Milius is a
Yeah, I
good
know.
writer.
I know. What's amazing is that Milius was so prescient about the kinds of presidents we would get.
Mm,
I think that was a caricature, maybe of Bill Clinton, maybe. Although Clinton had just entered office, and
mm.
I don't think it's likely that it's a direct caricature of him. But look at Trump is just. I mean, it's clear now that the New York Times got hold of his tax returns,
Oh my god.
the information that Trump is using
Uh,
the office to fill his coffers again. Like it's if it wasn't obvious before, like why he was
mm,
broke. He was
right.
broke. He's using the office of the president to enrich himself
Well,
directly.
yeah.
Like well, let's go to Mar-a-Lago for this function, and let's do
That's how the
back
G7 at my house.
yeah at my place. Let's go to yeah, and it's at a hotel that my name is on or whatever.
Well,
And it's just this president in clear and present danger is
uh,
obviously he's murderous. So it's not, as far as I know, Trump hasn't had anyone killed. But it's say what you want about Trump. I don't think he's done that yet. But anyway, but still, it's this idea that there is a narcissistic individual
mm,
who indulges in cronyism to get ahead in life, and he uses the resources of the American state, of the state, to pursue private whims, to pursue
mm.
solipsistic goals, and acts chagrined whenever you challenge him on it. Like, I'm the president of the United States. Like this monstrous kind of, you don't agree with me, you're a fucker. Fuck you. I'm not your president. Go vote for somebody else for all I fucking. You know what I mean? This
Uh,
idea that if you're not, it's this bone chilling kind of humorless, you know, co-opting, capturing of the American executive for personal gain. And how dare you question me on it? How
uh,
dare you? I'm president. I've been clothed as
uh.
to quote Daniel Day-Lewis's Lincoln, with immense power. Except rather than try to put an end to slavery, this president is trying to make $400 million or whatever it is he
Right.
owes. And
It's
it's just,
it's
but that's the interesting. Like you have to now go beyond that already over the top characterization of the president that we saw in Clear and Present Danger.
mm.
You got to go even beyond that now. It's just this. It's Brazil. It's Terry Gilliam's Brazil. I mean, it just doesn't work. It's just starting to really not, like, the stress of inertia in government. How our government has not governed for at least 8 years when John Boehner and Mitch McConnell just decided like this black president's doing nothing else. Fuck him.
Uh-huh.
He wants to ram Affordable Care Act down our throats when he has a super majority. Fuck him. He's never governing again. He'll have to rule by executive order. We're blocking every goddamn thing he does, which is what they did.
Yeah.
And then so starting around there, and then leading up to the present day where Trump is not interested in governing, at least Obama was interested in governing. Trump is not interested in governing. He's interested in picking our pockets.
He doesn't even do they go through a school? Like most politicians, I guess, learn the ropes as they go up the ranks, right? Of local councilmen, House, Senate, whatever, right? He just kind of got plopped in the middle. Like they just went, there you go, you're president.
Yeah.
Govern.
Right? You get vetted by in any industry, in any group, you get brought up by your peers. Like they assess you. Well, you say to them, I'm interested in being a politician. And they size you up, they ask you questions, they get to know you a little bit. And if you wash out, they stop returning your phone calls. But if you show some kind of potential, they say, all right, if you're serious about this, you got to do this, this, and this. You got to talk to this guy. We'll set you up with this guy maybe, or you got to, call me if you need anything. You're going to have to go to this person. But it's like any other thing, you got to get vetted by your peers, or I already have a giant platform like Trent did, and just break in. I mean, he literally just broke in. I don't think he was a Republican when he started. Wasn't he a Democrat or an independent or something?
I think he was a Democrat at one point. Like he hobnobbed with the Clintons, right? Or he's just himself. He's whatever. There was a vacancy in the Republican Party. That it works better for him and who he is and his brand, but that's where he slotted in. And I just can't believe, two images will stay with me with this Trump campaign, this Trump administration, this Trump era. One is holding the Bible above the church after shooting all the protesters.
After clearing away the protesters violently, yeah.
Yeah, and then now it's driving around the hospital as he has COVID-19. To wave at supporters.
Like over. Looking off, by the way. Looking like he's already lost weight, and looking gray. Well, he doesn't have any makeup on, maybe. That orange makeup that he uses, whatever it is. I'm being serious. I'm not.
No, it's just funny. Makeup. It's just funny.
And more than just that compound stuff that they put so that the glare doesn't shine off.
Stage makeup.
It's more stage makeup. Thank you. It's more than that. But it's just I wonder, like you said, Trump is just fitting into a role that allowed him to elevate himself in the national stage, onto the national stage. But I wonder if he could have I wonder if his vicious, divisive rhetoric and attitude would have played for Democratic voters. Like, I wonder if he said, Black Lives Matter, all cops. I mean, some of them are good, but they're mostly rapists. They're bringing crime, these cops. They're all corrupt. We ought to defund the police. I'm sick and tired of violence against our black brothers and sisters. We should build a wall around every police precinct. You know what I mean? Like, I wonder if his rhetoric, anyone who says the N-word should be shot. I'm going to go one step further. Any college campus where there's a professor of questionable ethics, we nuke the city. You know what I mean? Like, I wonder if he had gone, like anyone who, if you don't pronounce 72 gender pronouns, I'm going to have you arrested. I wonder if Democratic voter, or not Democratic, but people who vote for the Democratic Party,
right?
I wonder if they've been taken by that rhetoric. I wonder.
I don't know. I mean, it's pretty vulgar.
It's very vulgar, but it's like why does it resonate so much with? And I don't want the easy answer like Republicans are pieces of shit. I don't want no. I I can't believe that every member of the Republican Party, everybody who voted for Trump, is an abject racist. I can't. Maybe it's just too clean. It's too easy. But it's like I wonder what is it about the Republican Party? What is it about the conservative movement? How did they allow this fucking clown to
Mm.
co-opt the party?
Well,
How did they allow?
part of it is that because of the way he talks makes him seem like that outsider candidate that everybody always tries to pretend to be, which he seemed to be more of than anybody else. Plus his way of talking also like mirrored the anger that a lot of people in America feel, right? I
Mhm.
think that has something to do with it. People were getting uh upset with PC culture, I guess, and I associated that with Democrats, and they don't. There's not there. It seemed like there were a lot of, and he also offered seemingly easy answers to things. We'll put up a wall. That'll stop the drugs. That'll stop the violence. That'll stop the immigrants, the illegals coming in. When these issues are actually much more complex than that. You can't just be like, this will solve all of that, because part of the problem is like you have illegal immigrants or immigrants who didn't go through the proper process working on your fields, being a huge paying taxes, being a huge part of your economy, especially in California and other agricultural centers. So you put up a wall, divide them from their families. That's not going to solve any problems. That'll only exacerbate issues that are already there. But it seems plausible. It seems like a solution that you just go, yeah, see, we'll just do that. That'll do it.
Right.
Possibly but there's obviously more to it than just that. I mean, he had a TV show platform. Remember, I think it was the Washington Post interviewed the people who made that show, and they, uh,
Apprentice.
yeah, the apprentice, and that's not his real office, right? That's an all in a set. But so much of what he wrote on is the image that was projected with him. You're fired. I think that's what he said. I've never seen the show. Behind that big oak desk with the fancy walls and things like that. Like, it showed an image that represented power, presidential. It gave him credibility. Even before that show happened, he was a guy hawking like burgers for McDonald's and commercials, and you know, in the Home Alone 2 movie.
Yeah. I still don't. I guess is it. I mean, the Democratic Party was taken in by Hillary Clinton. Democratic voters, people voted for the Democrat. I mean, Hillary Clinton is not, you know, and I just so I guess getting hoodwinked by a presidential candidate is something that can truly bipartisan phenomenon, perhaps.
The
But
difference is Hillary Clinton is probably one of the most, no, she is the most successful woman in American history.
mm, she would have governed. She would have been a duplicitous thief, and but she would have at least governed.
Mhm.
I had this discussion with my mother of all people lately. Can you imagine if Hillary had gotten in? I'm like, well, we would have contained coronavirus.
Yeah.
No, we would have. 100% would have. If Obama was president, we would have.
If most
Uh,
anyone else was president, we
most
probably would have.
George W.
Yeah.
Bush would have contained it. I think, honest to God. And I long, dude. This is how crazy fucking America is. I wish Bush was president. I miss him. He was Republican. I didn't vote for him, but I miss him.
Mm.
I think the Iraq War was a terrible, terrible, costly blunder, and so does he nowadays. Incidentally,
Yeah.
which goes to show you that the man is in fact capable of some introspection and
Mm.
capable of
Possibly
admitting
remorse.
wrong,
Yeah.
remorse. He's I could never have said this about him when he was president, but he's moral. There's something about him that I would if it's him and Bernie Sanders running, I'm not voting Bernie all day long, but if it's honestly, if it was George W. Bush Biden, I'd vote W. Bush.
Really?
I
Huh.
just feel I absolutely would. The Democratic Party has revealed itself to be corrupt in a way I never would have suspected during the Obama years. how do we have Kamala Harris, we have a gay man, Pete Buttigieg, we have Tulsi Gabbard, Andrew motherfucking Yang, Bernie Sanders, and we get Biden,
Uh,
Jersey Joe, the glad-hander, who because of advanced age and grief over his son has incipient dementia. I don't need to be told. I don't need to see a medical report. The man's brain is going soft, and that's just first. It's the way of all life. Number one, he's at that age, and number two, he tremendous grief over the tragedies he's suffered late in life. Hunter Biden, I believe he's lost 2 wives to cancer, not one.
I'm not. Oh wow.
I believe he's lost at least 1 wife to cancer, at least. And it's just, how does your mind remain strong when you had that kind of horrific tragedy, personal tragedy befall it? I'm not blaming Joe Biden, but he is not. I'm voting for Kamala Harris. That's what I'm doing. I'm voting for Kamala Harris. And Biden, if he's with it, will at least attempt to negotiate with his Russian, sorry, with his Republican counterparts. I'm sorry.
Do you know something we don't, Brett?
No. Well, Mitch McConnell, we are very close. But it's all that to say is that we're living in very strange times here in America. Very strange time. They're not good.
Times indeed. No.
Good.
No,
And it's going to get a lot worse. It's going to get a lot worse. And it has to get a lot worse, because if it doesn't, then we're just going to keep degenerating into nothing. It has to get worse so we can confront it. It has to get a lot worse. When you start seeing bodies stacked up in the streets, like not from COVID-19, but from fucking just paralyzing, episodic, uncoordinated, rage-filled violence. People who are just like, you know what? I fuck you. You took everything from me. Bang. Because there's a lot of guns in this country. It's not like Hong Kong, where they're coming at you with improvised, they're coming at you with chef's knives and colanders. Or whatever, this is America. There's a gun for every man, woman, and child out in circulation, and then some. And it's just, you're just gonna see. And I'm grinning, because if you don't laugh, you're gonna cry. But you watch when these restaurants start closing down a lot more, and when the moratoriums are up on evictions, when people can finally get evicted who have not been paying rent since April. People who, you got what, 60 million adults, whatever, without a job out there, and this, oh boy.
Wait, aren't those $1,200 checks that the Treasury and Mitch McConnell's allow you to get? Or is that gonna do it?
Incidentally, that was very generous of them, in between subsidizing the airline industry's rapacious behavior. Airline industry. So let me get this. We had 10 fat years. All right, we had 10 very record-setting years. What we did, you see, was quite brilliant. So we get bailed out, right, in 2009. What we do after that, right, we split up that bailout money between all the top executives. Very fine, very nice. Everyone had a good time on Little St. James. It was a wonderful time. Keep that to yourself. Next thing we did, well, we want to at least show some kind of growth. We want to show that we're actually, fixing the old leaky hull in the business model. So what we do is we start packing in the peasants like sardines into the fuselage. We make first class even more decadent, spread out. We got these giant lounge chairs you sit in. We're buying Moet Chandon. It's a great time for them. To compensate, we're taking every Tom, Dick, and Harry, every sweaty fucking loser. We're packing them in like stale fish into a fucking can. You know what I'm saying? We just, we had 3 seats before. Now we have 4. What's the problem? You're only on the plane for 6 hours. Who cares? You're fine.
Excuse me, sir.
So what do we do?
Excuse me, sir.
Do we invest this money? Do we invest all this extra money? No, we shove it up our asses and up our noses. We have a great time with the money. Now COVID happens. 10 fat years. 10 fat years we made some to the tune of $1.2 trillion in profits as an industry. Where's all that money gone? I don't know. We need 30 billion more though, and we're still going to lay off over 28,000 employees. Now, how's that? How do you like that? Shove that right up your ass, American public. What are you going to do? You're going to shut us down? Good fucking luck.
How are you going to get the Cabo?
Yeah, how are you going to get to... Good luck getting a fucking Costa Maya. You fucking... Good luck. Good luck getting to Miami. You can have a super spreader situation down there, that unregulated hellhole. See, I kid, but I really don't.
No, I kid, but
I love how you tried to ask a question like a journalist, and I just steamrolled you. I didn't mean. I'm sorry.
No, yeah, I see that you didn't want me to play along. I get that.
Oh, am I interested in a fucking question from the peanut gallery? I'm beyond scrutiny. Take your question and go sit and coach for all I care.
It's that time, my bud, my friend. It's time to get into boozing through the New Yorker. You ready to strike a pose very quickly?
I am.
Dul, set,
make a point.
Starting off this week, boozing through it. Fuck it.
All right. So
I gotta come up with a new one.
We have an interesting story today, and I'm going to sound negative about it probably in my precinct, but I actually don't mean to be. I think it's going to be an interesting discussion. So, young amateur writers tend to make the same mistakes. In every writing class, there's a student who writes about a character who gets bamboozled to play Russian roulette. A female seduces her teacher, and a character who has snappy dialogue with a therapist. The reason the first two are popular is that there is instant conflict and stakes to rise. In roulette, death is on the table. In the set with the teacher, there are power dynamics to play with. In the situation with the therapist, however, it is because writers think it is interesting. It usually isn't. It usually a cheap ploy to show that the character is distressed and to dole out exposition quickly and easily. Susan Choi is not an amateur writer. She's won the Penn Faulkner Award, the Asian American Literary Award, and teaches creative writing at Yale University, her alma mater. But in her story, Flashlight, the bulk of the action takes place in a therapy session. Hyper-articulate 10-year-old Louisa is brought to the child therapist's office, where she is in a fight with Jerry Brickner to not give him what he wants, which is for her to talk about the death of her father. The scene does not feel as if it were written by amateur, but the story is a mess. At least I think so, and I think that's interesting. I don't understand why some of the choices that Susan made, but they are interesting. The story starts off in present tense, with Louisa walking the breakwater with her overly cautious father on the night he drowns, before shifting to past tense at least a year later while she's lying in bed, now living with her wheelchair-bound sick mother in the Los Angeles home of an aunt she never knew she had before. In an interview with The New Yorker about the story, Susan Choi said she plays with how much to leave out about her characters' backstories. She also said she's been wrestling with this material for years, trying to figure out what it wants to be. On this episode of Boozing Through the New Yorker, the dark, like a snake, slid onto her chest, organizing its weight into neatly stacked coils that might bury her, crush her, if she didn't leap out of bed just in time, and with deft skill, silently reopen the door. Susan Choi's Flashlight. What'd you think of it?
Well, it's interesting that the author admits she didn't know what to do with it, because I think she still doesn't. I think it's, but again, I never want to fault people for trying. I never fault for trying. And then, of course, when you get when it's published and when it's out there, certainly there's a degree of success that you've attained. But it seemed like she was setting the odds against her. Again, we have a short story where the protagonist is intensely unlikable, and the
Yeah.
story eventually doesn't even like the character either.
Yeah, it's
The
interesting, right?
story doesn't like this poor little girl whose mother is sick with, it sounds like, muscular dystrophy, because she's
Yeah.
not paralyzed. She gets out of the wheelchair at the very end
Right.
of the story, but she's got some kind of wasting illness. So that's horrible enough. But then you blame yourself for your father's death.
Hmm.
You're like, Dad, come out to the jetty. No, no, I don't want. Dad, come out to the jetty. I can't swim. Come out to the jetty. All right. And the one time he does, he fucking dies. The poor bastard.
Uh,
And so you have this intensely sympathetic. It's this little. She's precocious. She's smart.
mm.
She's suffering through all this personal tragedy and dislocation. She's moving around the world, but somehow I find myself hoping for worse things to happen to her. I'm like, can this
Oh,
little
really?
bitch die already? Oh, she's such a fucking jerk.
Yeah.
And it's fine. It's
Mhm.
fine that she's a jerk, but it's interesting that the story doesn't disabuse me of that notion.
Yeah.
Like, look at you, reader. What are you doing? Are you judging a 10-year-old girl? The
Mhm.
story's like, yeah, let's judge her. The tone
Yeah.
is like, yeah, she is a little bitch. She is a little fucking. It's like, whoa. I didn't quite know what to make of that. Like, you have like you said in your précis, you have an articulate, hyper articulate, as you put it, young girl, and we want to feel sympathetic. Like, oh my God, your father died, and your mom, but she just despises her mom. She hopes trap doors open underneath her mom's
Unhinged. I like the way
wheelchair.
that.
Hinging, yeah,
Yeah,
hinging open.
hinging open below
Because
her.
it's like this,
Yeah.
this
It's.
immediate, you know, and
Uh-huh.
now down the mother goes, hoping that this happens to her mother, and not even, like you pointed out at the beginning of the story, when the father's still alive, it's in the present tense. The
Which
narration.
I didn't understand
She
why.
despises the mother even then. Oh, I don't know
Yeah.
why either. I don't know
Uh,
why
I,
either.
I kept thinking about where this story. I do this with a lot of things, but I keep because she talks in that New Yorker article about not giving him much backstory, right? Like she plays with how much backstory to give, and I
Because she
kept
doesn't know
thinking,
what the
why
story's
doesn't it?
about.
Yeah, why doesn't it start? And like I said, okay, why don't we cut out the part of her father dying, because we don't actually see him die. It's just them walking on the jetty. We can. That doesn't really give us too much, except for the fact that she already doesn't like her mother. Her mother's already sick then,
Already doesn't like her mom.
right?
You know.
And then we have the
And
bedroom scene where she doesn't like the light, where she doesn't like the darkness, but she punishes her mom, who apparently wants to like hug her and touch her and read her bedtime stories, which she denies her. And then we get to the therapy scene, and I thought maybe we could just have that therapy scene as the whole story. Do we need those other two sections as much?
right.
And because it just seemed a little, like I said, it's kind of a mess because of the switch in tense, and then there's weird things going on with the narration. Like the narrator doesn't know everything. Like no one was
Right.
there to know the last line that her father said to her, but knows a lot more about other characters and what they're thinking and what they want. So
Right, yeah. I had to remind myself a few times that the little girl wasn't narrating the story, because the narrator, the things were being said that the little girl couldn't possibly know.
uh-huh.
But
Yeah.
I'm like, oh yeah, it's not the little girl narrating. It's a narrator who's perched on the shoulder, as it were, of the little girl. But yeah, it was confusing about what the narrator knew and what the narrator didn't know, which is another kind of, which again, I mean, I don't know the writer from Adam, but by her own admission, apparently in an interview, she didn't quite know what to do with the story. And I'm glad that you told me that, because in beer, there's a phenomena where Kolsch is a remarkable beer style, um, because it is about as naked a beer as you can get. It's it's so plain, right?
Oh, I didn't know
That
that.
and it's a plain beer. Like it's moderately alcohol. It's about 5% typically. The idea is that it's refreshing. The
Right.
idea about this says a little bit of alcohol. It's refreshing. It's clean. It's crisp. It's it's like the cacio e pepe of beer. Like you just have this stripped down naked beer
Mm.
and you enjoy it. Now, as a brewer, right, if you're brewing this beer, it's extremely challenging and rewarding because A, you get kudos from your peers if you pull it off. But B, it's like your brew system is solid if you can produce this beer without any off flavors, without any kind of sourness or any kind of cardboardiness or any off flavor is going to show up because there's nothing for the off flavor to mingle with. It's just naked. It's just out in the open because
Mm.
there's nothing else going on with the beer. It's very plain, right? So when you encounter a dark Kolsch, like a roasted malt, like a roasted Kolsch or a dry hop Kolsch or something like that, alarm bells go off. You're like, all right, why choose to brew a naked style and then put ornaments on it?
Right.
What are you hiding? What are you hiding? Are you hiding off flavors? That's the thing. That's why, and this story has these weird clunky jumps and these and I'm one like these shifts in perspective, these jarring and I'm wondering if it's just to cover the fact that the story doesn't mean anything. The
I'm
story
wondering
has
that too.
I'm
I
wondering, like, why are we going to follow a little girl who is profoundly unlikable, understandably so,
mhm.
and then the story itself turns its back on her, which is so amazing. Were you just as jarred as I was by the last line?
I thought it was
I couldn't believe it.
I love that last line. Like I love the way that
It's
she's
great.
left in the dark. That's the way it
Yeah.
ends. It's like her mother
You
just says, "Fine,
stole
I'm
this.
done
Oh,
with
I
you."
gotta go apologize now. You actually did steal this flashlight.
Yeah.
And the mother who's just freakishly gotten out of the chair in the
Uh-huh.
dark, like you're like,
Leapt across the
whoa,
space. Is how it's written, I believe. Yeah. This.
yeah. And it's like, whoa. So now the mother gets back in the wheelchair with the aunt, and
Uh,
the mother rolls out the aunt, and they slam the door. Somebody slams the door, leaving her in the dark.
mhm.
And it's like, you know, the
It's
story itself doesn't want anything to do with her at the end. It's just like,
it's really good. I think I learned something from that actually. That scene, how to handle an ending of a story like that. Like it's such a great ending, but we have I there's a lot of things in the story that I generally don't like. I don't like hyper precocious or hyper articulate kids. And
mm,
usually I don't like
something fake about it.
yeah,
There's always
I
something fake. Like
yeah, I
Harold may have learned how to read before he could learn how to speak, but I don't care. Like it's
mhm.
just so rare. Like there might actually be kids out there who are that perspicacious and that articulate, but I don't care. I don't make them the subject of a story.
Yeah, I
It's gonna,
don't it
it's
seems
just
cheating to me, right?
cheating. Like always having a superhero as a protagonist.
Yeah. And
In a
then it's
way.
also got the therapist, which I also don't particularly like in stories. Like I was saying, it seems like a cheap way to. It's the equivalent to having a character vomit, after seeing something horrible or whatever. It's a way. It's a quick way of showing something, of getting information out, and like the vomit is like having like show them that they're overcome with emotion or what they're seeing is horrible, so they vomit, as opposed to trying to find a more complex way to show those emotions. And not that they're all the time wrong, right? I'm not saying never,
Oh,
but
right.
it's like
I
that.
thought the back and forth between Brickner,
Mm,
Dr. Brick, and Louisa, the little girl, That was the highlight of the story for me. I thought it
Yeah,
was very well done.
me too.
Very well done. Again, I'm not saying that Susan Che is a bad writer. Never, not at
Mm,
all. It's just okay. It's okay to be stuck with a story. It's totally
yeah.
okay to not know what the fuck to do with it. In a way, this is the one thing that troubled me about the story. It seemed too obviously autobiographical. Like for the story to be confirmed in this interview, for the story to be sticking with her that for that long, it's about her. She doesn't know what to think of herself. And this is a main reason why I don't like learning author biographies.
Mm,
I don't want it to get because when I learn the details, it's like, oh shit, is this why? I wanted it to be magical. I wanted a story to just come at me
exist.
as itself.
Yeah.
I don't want to think that Susan Che was this precocious, soon to be Yale student, succeeding in a very competitive field, but looks at herself kind of as this little bitch in a way who was cruel to her mother, and you know what I mean. Like I know her mother's probably still alive. Who knows? But the
Mm,
fact that she psychologically is identifying with Louisa, I just didn't want to know that because again, what there's other explanations, and I'm open to maybe this is a niece of hers or a sister of hers. This
right.
Louisa character, though, is somebody very dear to her, whether it's herself or somebody close, and she doesn't know what to make of it, doesn't know
Mm.
what to do with it. But I just thought it was such an interesting choice to 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 essentially reject the character. Like there's something ornery about Louisa that predates the tragedy that
Mm.
she witnessed.
But to to reject the character kind of makes me think, especially when reading this story, when I'm not sure what she's really trying to say.
Hmm.
I go, why? Like, I don't. I want to understand why she
You
wrote
got
it.
you got to get it out. She had to get it
Sure.
out.
She said in the interview that it may become something longer, which
Great. Another fragment in the New Yorker.
no, but I think it's interesting that the New Yorker published this, even though it doesn't like it's not like I think that is an interesting choice to do to publish it. You know, as opposed to like the Kafka piece or some of the other stories that are excerpts from novels. I think is a much more interesting piece to talk about, to discuss from like a process point of view. You know,
Hmm.
because if because I look at it and I go, maybe that's just my style, or maybe what I'm working with. I would have cut it off. I would have just started right because the way it starts is when with the therapist scene is she was supposed to go to school today, but she was pulled out early this morning to go to the therapy's office, and that seems like a pretty decent way to start. It's got the now, it's got the difference, the change, and it has a lot of that information that we got from the other parts, like the death of the father, and the way they trickled in is a lot more natural, I thought, or a lot more even than just saying, here's this scene where the father dies, here's that scene where she's in bed and we find out that she.
I like that. And I totally agree with you. The
Mm,
story could have started the way you just suggested.
uh-huh,
But in the movie Unforgiven, the movie starts with this very subdued uh, uh, guitar music, very subdued acoustic guitar
mm,
music, and it's sad, and it's just like a silhouette of a homestead and a man digging a grave. It's all silhouetted against this orange sky. It's probably sunset,
mm,
and it just shows, and like almost like a title, like lettering that rises up. I don't know what that's called. It tells this backstory about
right.
the major character William Money, played by Clint Eastwood. And you're like, why? And then the main action shifts to the town of Big Whiskey, where most of the action of the story takes place. Like, well, why start it that way? Why start it with this
Preamble,
scene
this.
of a man
Yeah.
burying his wife?
Mm,
Well, because the story is about that. The story is about the monster named William Money,
Mm.
and how when his wife died, his wife who quote cured him of wickedness, this remorseless, violent, drunken maniac who even other violent, drunken maniacs were afraid of, and never slept with their eyes closed around him, was actually brought to a level of humanity he hadn't occupied in years by love for a good woman.
Mm.
And when that good woman died, it left him naked to the influences of the frontier, bounty hunting, murder, etc. And he goes back, he relapses back into a monster, right? So there's this thing where you he assumes the identity he probably never should have, he assumes the identity that's right to him, his proper identity. Maybe in this story, Flashlight by Susan Che, I mean, that's the the thing which cements Louisa in fear of the dark, kleptomania, these power games she plays with adults. It's because she lost her compass. She lost her father. And it's like that's the scene. She never really seemed to care for her mother, but she did seem to care for her father. She did actually seem to care for him a little bit.
There's a line in it that
Even though
says
his
that she's
influence
holding
was
his hand for him or something like that. Like that it's unnecessary to hold her hand, but she says something for the sake of her father, not for her own sake, because he's gentle. He's actually seems so gentle that he's overcautious, and so it's
to a psychologically damaging degree. I mean, you don't let your daughter eat anything unless you've poked through it with
at
a
a
fork to
restaurant.
see if there's glass. I know,
Yeah.
and you helicopter parent to an obscene degree,
Uh-huh.
and yet you're the cherished figure. And how badly must she feel betrayed by her mother that she despises her mother this much for being sick, for not
Do you,
having any sympathy for her mother at all, for
mhm.
being sick.
Do you
No
think she's
sympathy at
actually
all.
sick?
The mother?
Yeah,
Yes, I do.
yeah, I think so too. But that was a question
I
they
do.
asked Susan in the article, in the interview. Is she actually
Mhm.
sick? And she said, well, she says I guess it was a typed interview because like she responded by emails because she's like, that is the question I wanted you to ask yourself. Is she sick? Is actually how she ends the question answer.
And that's so
HMMM.
boring. That's
It's a
so
little.
boring.
It's a little.
It's so
Yeah.
boring. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm
And do you,
wagering I'm wagering Susan Che's in her 40s or 50s when that kind of postmodernist horse shit was in vogue
there
and she was writing it. It's I don't find that to be particularly interesting.
there
Yeah.
there is something interesting about the time it's set in. Like it's in a very specific time, which is like the
Mhm.
late 1970s. And the only
Mhm.
way we know that is because of the movies they discuss.
Mm. Oh,
Close
well, I
Encounters of the
thought that
Third
was
Kind.
very well done. The idea that Richard Dreyfuss, this movie, The Closing Hours, he leaves his family.
Uh-huh.
And that's interesting. He leaves his family. And that's what the father does,
Mhm.
not against his will.
Mhm.
He leaves the family.
I've
He's
never seen
swept
it.
away.
Same thing with
Yeah,
Star
Richard
Wars, right?
Dreyfuss,
Star Wars,
that was
Luke,
the
I
whole
am your father.
yeah.
There's the absence of a father figure in that, too. I guess. I don't know. I haven't seen Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
I think the child psychologist there, Dr. Brickner, is asking about Star Wars to contrast.
Uh,
This little girl initially says, that Close Encounters of the Third Kind scared her.
right.
And she backtracks when he kind of latches onto that. She's like, "No, it didn't scare me. Aliens aren't scary. It was kind of boring." Blah blah blah.
Like a
And he goes,
Halloween. Scary like
"What about
Halloween.
yeah, scary
Mm.
Halloween, right? You like Star Wars? No, I don't like that. Whatever."
Mm.
Well, why do you like that? Do you like sci-fi movies? No, it's not. Close Encounters of the Third Kind is not a sci-fi movie. He
Mm.
finally gets to the point where it's like, everyone thought this guy was the father, figure in the film was crazy, building this little mud tower and shit, and then this normal life
Mm.
that the family had is suddenly turned on its head.
It's
So what do
interesting
you
that you
feel?
mentioned that, like about how the story kind of gives up on her, because it kind of feels like the psychologist or the psychiatrist, whichever one he is, gives up on her too. Go play with the toys. But of course he's writing notes, he's doing his work and stuff like that, so it might not be that, but it's kind of the same.
I think the writer gave us a clue as to what the story could mean, possibly the main meaning of it. I'm just thinking of this right now, and you reminded me of it. It's a line that occurs around the middle of the story, and it's when the young protagonist, Louisa, realizes or acknowledges that no adult really listens.
It's that's at the start of the
I think
psychiatrist.
no one really listens. No one really gives a fuck.
Mhm.
No one really cares. This is a profoundly people care when it suits them, right? And her father, who seemed to care for its own sake, is gone. And the mother, for some reason, I'm not quite sure what it is, but Louisa rejects her mother's concern, rejects her aunt's concern. But the message is that no one really, well, the message is that Louisa thinks no one really listens. I think that's important.
Mm.
Louisa believes that no one's really on her team. And the question is, I think that what happens to a child who thinks that way? And what do we do with a child who doesn't seem to have any redeeming characteristics? Is she an ultimate object of, like, can we pity her even though she's full of contumely, and and for all of her rhetoric, for all of her uh, precocious intellect, she's she doesn't know herself, which is fine. She's 10.
Mm.
But why should the narrative punish her? I don't understand. Like, why should she be an unsympathetic figure? I don't get that. I really don't get that. And it's like, normally, why wouldn't we pity a little girl whose mother is suffering from an illness and whose father is dead, and she witnessed it? She witnessed it. And she's so much in shock that the sound of the flashlight dropping is one on sand,
Mm.
which at first I thought was, they're talking about earthquakes and, you know, she's out on a breakwater. I thought maybe, they were about to get swept away by a tsunami or something. That, how water pulls out
Mm.
first
The
and
current,
then
yeah.
rushes back in. But no, she wouldn't have survived that. So that's not the good answer. It's just that she came back online consciousness wise
Yeah.
after her father was already swept away, you know. And that's why the flashlight drops on the sand and not in the water. And here's the thing, here's a really terrifying thing. Her father was holding the flashlight. Now she is. What the hell happened? What horror
Mm.
transpired that she couldn't even remember it? Was she holding her father's hand?
Uh.
Did he make her take the flashlight?
Did he
You know,
drop the flashlight when he fell in?
if so, how does she get it?
No, may have
It's
dropped it on the breakwater as opposed to
breakwater, this slippery,
yeah,
lichen covered.
concrete.
It's like,
Yeah.
I don't really imagine that.
Maybe she asked to hold it
Maybe. Who
because
knows? We don't know.
kids do that. Can I have that, Dad? Daddy, I have a kid that does that, so I understand being anything in my hands.
Right? Did she kill him?
I was wondering that too.
Did she fucking kill him? Is she just a bad egg?
Or kill him by accident. like not to purposely to kill him, but to push him, right? Like just to kids do
Hey, Daddy, you
things.
sure you can't swim? Poop.
Yeah,
You know,
because she's been in that water all the time. It says she swims in that every day.
well,
Well,
she clearly blames herself for his death, but kids do that. That's
yeah,
child psychology 101. Kids
mm,
blame themselves for all manner of adult vicissitudes.
yeah,
Mm.
and for
I
adult
blame
problems,
myself for my
parents
own
breaking
abuse.
up. Hmm?
Yeah, I blame myself for my own abuse to this day. I think I
Mm,
deserved it. That, I am a coward. I am a pussy. I am a wimp.
mm.
Those lessons I can't ever divest myself of that. I carry that around every single day. And it's just because I was a child when I was abused. I was a very small child, and I didn't have the experience to be able to say, like today, if somebody tried to systematically torture me and abuse me the way my father did, I'd say, go piss up the end of a rope, you cocksucker. Like I'd
Mm.
fight him. Right. I don't have that defiance. As a kid, you just take it.
Right. I read
So
that.
for Louisa, she lost her father. She blames herself for
I
him
don't.
dying.
I don't remember where I read this, but I read in the last week that when children are, verbally abused, they don't have the sense of self built up yet, so they believe it
Counteracted.
is their fault, that they deserve it.
It's
When
it's
you
just
hit a
another.
child,
Yep.
mm,
Children are scouring daily life for clues as to who they are and how to behave. And if you give them violence and anger, you're programming them.
have you ever written about a kid before? A child?
A
As in, like,
protagonist kid?
yeah.
No, it's too hard.
Uh,
Too hard.
the
So I mean,
closest
I've
I came.
had I've had kids in stories before,
Yeah.
but they've never been the protagonist. They've never been the focus.
Uh,
Yeah,
I,
very
you
hard.
know,
I mean, I can
yeah.
understand why this has beguiled Susan Che. I can totally sympathize. It's hard.
How to
It's
write
so hard,
dialogue for a kid that sounds like a kid is saying it.
right?
That's
Right.
how to
How do you how do you engross readers who have a billion potential things they could read with a kid?
Mm.
That's a question of the marketplace, isn't it? Like, how do you? We had this strange cat and mouse with the psychiatrist, I suppose, and or the flashlight. And of course, what do we? What do we? It's amazing that you have this very articulate child whose fears are very childish. They're very puerile.
We didn't even talk about the dollhouse. That
No,
was
we
such a
didn't.
big part of the story. Like, there's all these items in the piece that I'm not sure if they. I remember, like, when I write a first draft, I tend to pollute it with tons of stuff that afterwards I have to strip it back from because it's just like obscuring the fact that they're there to, like, obscure the fact that I don't know what I'm writing about yet.
Right, right.
And like, there's three things in particular that I think of. One is the flashlight, which is obviously important. Second is the dollhouse, and the third are like her clothes that she talks about. The
Hmm.
clothes is probably the something that is closer to being finished because she's talking about she doesn't feel like she is herself in jeans and in these clothes. That has to do with identity. The dollhouse, I mean, it made such a little impact on us that we didn't even talk about it.
Yeah. One thing I remember about the dollhouse is how she felt grieved. She felt aggrieved, and she felt uh, sad, as it were, almost for her father, who was laboring so hard to build something ugly she didn't want.
Yeah.
But then she, as it were, through the example of her mother, who taught her how she could contribute to it.
Mm-hmm.
Here, take this postage stamp and surround it with cardboard. Now it looks like a painting.
Uh-huh.
This tiny little life in miniature. Even though it's homely, you made it. Your
Uh-huh.
father made it. I made it. It's a family thing. We all did it together. And when we
Those are
went
good
next,
points.
it's just this thing where the dollhouse, you, it's a confirmation of family, I think, in the sense in that they all had a hand to play in it. The
Uh-huh.
flashlight, I think, is like this is your father.
Yeah.
This is what you hold on to.
The light in the darkness.
This is what this is. Yes, your father's the light in the darkness, and you lost it. You lost your father. You lost the flashlight. It's gone. This tide swept it away. So you steal it.
Mm.
You steal it to feel. Obviously, compulsive thieves, do it to feel power and to outwit the people who are trying to catch them. I mean, that's a psychological truism going back 40 years. So we know why she's stealing things. She's stealing things to get over on people. But the flashlight is an especially poignant theft because it's first of all, you're stealing light. Okay, Prometheus, whatever, who cares? But you're also through this object, you're able to, as it were, rescue your father. Have him have this flashlight with you at night. Because the night is what really, it's night scary. Darkness is scary. We're, in the West, in westernized countries, we all sleep alone. No culture has a fucking teddy bear. Because kids, you're stepping on kids. Like, the way human beings used to live, kids and adults are just part of the same thing happening.
Yeah,
We didn't have
childhood is a new invention.
Childhood is a new thing. Well, not necessarily, but constituted as your own room, your own,
Well,
you know,
yeah. I read a book
this
a long time ago that said
possession.
it was like when you hit 10, you have to go to work, right? Like the idea of childhood as we know it now, where there's like specific clothes, specific toys, specific things just for kids is
Yes,
more, yeah.
yes, right, much more. And the idea that you have these stuffed animals and things to keep you company in the dark. I mean, no other culture really has that except for westernized ones. And it's this strange thing where yes, you're alone in the dark and you're missing your father and you're missing your mother in a way, and you have this flashlight and there it is, and they take that from you too. But you fully deserve to have it taken from you. But then you're not willing to be helped. It's a horrible bind that this young character's in. I feel terrible. I felt awful reading this story because I want to like her. I want to. She's a victim.
Yeah.
In a way, she's a victim, but she's a victim. It's like I had flashbacks of being a teacher with kids who just would not let you help them. Like they would not let, their lives were so horrible. I had this one kid. His father was his mother was a madam in a shit bum brothel in that god awful port district where I used to teach at the end, Yongdam. And there was this corrupt street near Tapdong where his mother had a nickel and dime brothel, and his father was a John who was long gone. Right, he might have even been married to somebody else. Who knows? So he had no father, and his mother was an alcoholic, madam. And you just couldn't. He was as profound a victim as you could find, and he was the worst rotten sack of shit human you would ask for. Like it was the ugliness of his environment had seeped into his soul to such a degree that there was nothing you could do. It would have taken concerted effort by a devoted team of specialists just to maybe get this kid to vote. Like his name was Kim Gu-hyun, never forget it. And I just felt awful. Like, how do you get this kid to not organize his dumber cohorts into brutalizing this kid who wears glasses like he was a bully? And I hated him, and I felt sorry for him all at once because of how he was becoming a monster. And he was only 13, but he was already the ringleader of this small little posse that used to terrorize this poor kid who just because he was a little chubby. He had glasses. He was very sweet, so he was an easy mark.
It's fucking textbook, you know.
Oh,
Like,
dude, I watched it play in front of my eyes. I watched the very reason why we should all be extinct happen right in front of my eyes. Like this horrendous cyclical ugliness, like a child born into lovelessness, into a brutal world with very little options, right? In Tapdong, in Jeju, or in the 90s when this kid was born. And this kid's abused, doesn't have a father, probably gets picked on and teased for that, whatever. Now he becomes this brutal, snide, ironic, nothing warm about him. He becomes a knife blade. Like this kid becomes the blade of a knife. You grip it and you get cut.
Yeah.
You look at it from the outside, it's shiny, it's of a piece. You try to get close to it, it stabs you. Okay. And then now he was spreading pain around him. And and it's like this little girl in the character, Louisa, is profoundly a victim, but that frustration I felt reading it, that she didn't seem to be able to be reached.
Mm-hmm.
No
attempt.
They were trying to, but no attempt was good enough for her. I don't know. It's a tough story to read, man, but it was good.
Yeah.
Ultimately, right? It's good.
Good conversation. We got stuff from it. I learned from it, I think.
Yeah.
And that's about all of the time we have for today on Boozing, or this week on Boozing. Next week, we're going to be looking at Switzerland by Nicole Krauss. Switzerland by Nicole Krauss. And you making headway on this?
I got mine. I have mine over there. It was printed in '94. I have a 1994 version
of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I'm looking forward to talking to this with you. What do you think? 2 weeks? Not this week, not the next episode, but the episode after that?
Yeah, I think I'd have it done in 2 weeks. Sure.
Awesome. We'll gun it for then. If you haven't liked us and giving us rosy 5-star reviews, please do so.
5 stars, please.
5 stars, please give it to us. Give it to us, all of your stars. And until next time, I'm Daryl. He's Brett. Together, we are boozing. Even though we don't really booze anymore, but that's a discussion for another time. Keep scribbling.